Another feature or another fundamental salient feature you can say is the flexibility and the rigidity. A constitution is said to be flexible if it provides a simple procedure for its amendment, for its change. A rigid constitution, on the other hand, is one which requires special, complex and more technical procedure for its amendment. Thus, in order to determine the rigidity or the flexibility of the constitution, we have to see the nature of amendment. Indian constitution is both rigid as well as flexible. The framers of the constitution were keen to avoid both excessive rigidity and flexibility of the constitution. The same is evident from the statement made by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. While we want this constitution as solid and permanent as we can make it, there is no permanence in the constitution. There should be certain flexibility. If you make anything rigid or strong, you stop the nation's growth. In any event, we cannot make the constitution so rigid or strong that it cannot be adopted to the changing conditions. What we may do today may not be wholly applicable tomorrow. Thus, both the aspects, that is rigidity and the flexibility of the constitution, is need for the continuous transition. Another feature of the constitution is the existence of fundamental rights. Constitution of India in part 3rd contains the list of fundamental rights from Article 13 to 35. Fundamental rights are essential to protect the rights of people against the arbitrary exercise of the state's power. Fundamental rights impose negative obligation on the state not to encroach upon the individual liberty in its various dimensions. Professor H.J. Lasky has rightly observed that a state is known by the rights it maintains. Thus, Constitution, by guaranteeing certain inherent and basic rights in the form of fundamental rights, states do affirm the basic and the natural principle that individual by birth is entitled to certain basic rights. However, Constitution does not guarantee absolute fundamental rights to the people. Reasonable restrictions can be imposed on the exercise of fundamental rights. The reasonable restrictions are contained in the Constitution itself. The Constitution not only provides for the fundamental rights, but also gives enforceability to it. Another feature of Constitution is the existence of directive principles. Part 4th of the Constitution relates to the directive principles. It sets forth the ideals and the objectives to be achieved for setting the ideal of the welfare state. Directive principles provide basis for social and economic justice. The directive principles are not enforceable in a court of law, but they are nevertheless fundamental in the governance of the country. These principles provide for the criteria with which we can judge the performance of the government. The directive principles, these have been adopted from the Irish Constitution. Another fundamental feature of Constitution is the existence of fundamental duties within it. The Constitutional 42nd Amendment Act 1976 also incorporated certain fundamental duties on the citizens so as to observe certain norms, certain basic norms of democratic conduct and behavior. Article 51A enumerates fundamental duties to be observed by the citizens.